They say temptation doesn't arrive like a storm. It doesn't shout or knock things over. No, it's quiet. It creeps in like fog under a door. Slowly, softly, until one day, you turn around and realize it's wrapped around you, breathing down your neck when you're all alone. That's what it did to me. My name is Amber. I'm 25, single, and I work as a live-in nanny for a beautiful family in Miami. Vanessa, the mother, is everything you'd want in a woman. Kind, gracious, warm. She treats me like a younger sister, always thoughtful, always smiling. And then there's Mr. Blake, Vanessa's husband. He's tall, with that quiet authority people don't question. A presence that fills a room, even when he says nothing. His salt and pepper hair, his calm, deep voice, there's something about him that makes you feel like the world stops for a second when he speaks. I used to think it was admiration, but over time, I realized it was something else. Something dangerous. It started the night Vanessa left for a week-long business trip. The house felt hollow without her. The children slept early. The air was too still. The silence felt too loud. I tried to distract myself, but the quiet brought thoughts I didn't want to think. I wandered the hallway more than once that night. My room was right across from his. Every creak in the floor felt like a question I wasn't ready to answer. I wasn't supposed to think of him. But I did. More than I should have. I knocked on his door that night. My heart was pounding so loud I thought he might hear it before I even touched the wood. When he opened the door, there was concern in his eyes. Amber? Are you okay? I nodded, but the truth was, I wasn't sure. I just needed to be near someone. I needed comfort, clarity, something. He let me in. The room smelled like him, earthy, clean, familiar. We stood there, unsure, a quiet energy hanging between us. I've been thinking a lot, I said softly. Too much, maybe? He looked at me for a long time, like he was searching for the right words, or perhaps the courage not to say them. Amber, he said finally, this isn't right. I nodded. I know. But neither of us moved. The days that followed became a blur of emotion and confusion. We never touched. Not physically. But we were doing something just as dangerous, building a connection built on looks that lingered too long, conversations that went a little too deep, silences that said more than words ever could. At breakfast, we avoided eye contact. But our minds never did. In the hallway, when he passed close by, my breath caught. Not from fear, but from anticipation. One night, I fell asleep with the memory of his voice in my mind, the way he had said my name like it meant more than just a label. I found myself wishing the week wouldn't end, wishing Vanessa wouldn't come home so soon, wishing things I shouldn't. But the universe doesn't let those wishes last. She returned 2 days early. The front door swung open while I was packing the kids' lunches. Her voice, joyful, unexpected, echoed through the hallway. I froze. So did he. Everything inside me collapsed in one breath. She rushed in, hugged her children, kissed her husband, and smiled at me like nothing had changed. Because for her, nothing had. But for me, everything had. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, replaying every moment, every silent conversation, every lingering look. A quiet knock at my door startled me. It was him. He stepped in, closing the door gently behind him. For a moment, we just stood there in silence. No words, no explanations. Just heavy hearts caught in something too complicated to name. I shouldn't be here, he said. But you are, I whispered. He sat beside me and looked down at his hands. Vanessa and I. We haven't been close in a long time. She's been gone more than she's been home lately. I don't blame her. It's just life. But lately I've felt invisible. I know the feeling, I said quietly. He turned to me, his eyes tired. "You see me." Those words hit me harder than I expected. I did see him. Not just as Vanessa's husband. Not just as the man who paid my salary. I saw the loneliness behind the strength, the silence behind the smile. We sat together until the sun began to rise. No touching. No lines crossed. But the truth? They already had been. It was nearly midnight again. The house had fallen silent, with only the distant ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall breaking the stillness. My thoughts spun like a hurricane as I stared at the ceiling, covers pulled tightly around me, heart echoing with memories I couldn't silence. That week had changed everything. And now she was home. Then came the knock. Soft, hesitant, just like mine had been that night. I froze. Another knock. A little louder. I slowly sat up, heart pounding in my ears. My breath caught in my throat as I walked barefoot across the room and opened the door. It was him. His eyes met mine, tired, conflicted, and full of something I couldn't name. He looked like a man who had just lost something he hadn't realized he truly needed until it was almost gone. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low, almost trembling. I stepped aside. He walked in and sat at the edge of my bed, hands clasped tightly. I sat beside him, but not too close. The distance between us felt vast now, even though just days ago it had disappeared entirely. "I thought I could handle this," he began, staring at the floor. "I thought I could just go back to normal, back to my life. But I can't. I see her, and I feel guilt. But when I look at you, I feel everything else." I said nothing. I couldn't. My throat was tight with unshed tears. "She's my wife," he continued, his voice cracking. "She's been by my side for years. We have a life together. Children. History. But with you," he finally turned to look at me, eyes shining. "With you, I feel alive. Like I matter. Like someone truly sees me." Tears slipped down my cheeks. I hated that I understood. I hated that I felt the same. "I never meant to hurt anyone," I whispered. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being the nanny. I stopped being a guest in this house. I started hoping for more. He reached for my hand, but I pulled back gently. "We crossed a line," I said, my voice shaking. "And even if it felt like the most real thing in the world, it doesn't erase what we've done." She trusted me. The kids love me, and now every smile I give them feels like a lie. He looked down, ashamed. I never wanted to be the man who broke his promises. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Then maybe this is where we find our courage. Not in stealing moments, but in walking away before we destroy everything. Silence settled over us like fog. "I'll never forget you," he whispered. "Nor I you." He stood slowly, like his heart had grown heavier. As he reached the door, he paused and looked back. "I hope you find someone who sees you the way I did. Someone who can choose you without guilt, without hesitation." And then he left. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded louder than thunder in my ears. I sat in the darkness for a long time, not crying, not moving, just breathing through the ache in my chest. Because endings aren't always marked by dramatic goodbyes. Sometimes they come in whispers. In the quiet decision to let go of what could destroy something beautiful, that night I didn't sleep. But for the first time, I began to heal. And maybe, just maybe, that was the start of something even more powerful than love, self-respect, redemption, and peace. The days that followed felt like walking through smoke after a fire. The air still held the scent of everything that had burned, even though the flames were gone. He didn't come back. Not to my room. Not to speak. Not to say goodbye again. I saw him once, across the hallway. He was carrying his youngest daughter, her tiny arms wrapped around his neck, her giggle echoing off the walls like wind chimes. He caught my eyes for the briefest second, and just like that, he looked away. Maybe he had to. Maybe I did too. Every part of me ached, but I forced myself to keep moving. I helped the children get ready for school. I read them bedtime stories, braided the little one's hair, packed lunches with notes inside. I did everything I used to do, but it all felt different now. The innocence was gone. His wife, was kind, gentle, even. She would sit across from me in the mornings with a soft smile and ask how I was sleeping. Sometimes I wanted to scream, to fall to my knees and confess everything. To apologize. But I couldn't, because that wouldn't be healing. It would be cruelty dressed as truth. So I stayed quiet, until I couldn't. One rainy afternoon, while the children were at their grandparents' house, I found myself in the kitchen, hands trembling around a teacup. She walked in, humming a tune from the radio. Her eyes sparkled when she saw me. "You've been such a blessing," she said. "I don't know how we managed before you." And something inside me broke. Tears welled up without warning. I turned away, ashamed, but she noticed. "What's wrong?" I shook my head. "I'm just tired. I think I need to go." She frowned, stepping closer. "Go where?" "Home," I whispered. "Is something wrong here?" "Yes, everything." But how could I say that? "You've been wonderful to me," I said, forcing a smile through my tears. "But I think it's time I found something of my own." She watched me carefully. There was a shift in her gaze, like a shadow passed behind her eyes. A pause too long, a breath too deep. A knowing. She didn't ask. She didn't have to. Instead, she nodded slowly and pulled me into a hug. "You're a good person," she said softly. "Don't carry more than you have to." That night, I packed my things. I folded each memory carefully into a suitcase, along with the guilt, the hope, the ache of what never could be. I stood in the children's room one last time, watching them sleep. I kissed their foreheads, one by one, and whispered prayers over them, prayers I didn't even know I believed in. I left before sunrise. The sky was gray, the streets still empty. My cab drove slowly past the familiar garden, the porch where we had once sat in silence, the hallway that had held both temptation and regret. And then it was all behind me. Months later. The city was louder, messier, lonelier. But in that loneliness, I found parts of myself I'd forgotten. I found a small apartment with peeling paint, but sunlight that poured through the windows like gold. I found a job at a library where I helped children find stories that reminded them they were never alone. I began journaling again, every morning and every night, writing not about him, but about me. Who I was becoming. Healing isn't always a grand transformation. Sometimes it's just the ability to wake up without your heart shattering. Sometimes it's making tea without remembering who once drank it with you. Sometimes it's seeing a father walk with his child and smiling instead of aching. One afternoon, months later, I saw him. He was walking across the park with his family. The children ran ahead. The wife laughed softly at something one of them said. He looked older, or maybe just more tired. He looked up, and for a moment, our eyes met. He smiled, just a soft, small smile. Not of longing, not of pain, just peace. And I smiled back. Not because we were okay, but because I was.